What do you think of when you hear the term third world country? Poverty, corruption, underdevelopment, inequality, or all of these? Well, what if we told you that one of the fastest growing economies in the world, with a population of over 1.3 billion people, is still considered by some to be a third world country? Yes, we're talking about India. But why is India still labeled as a third world country? And what does this mean for its future? In this video, we'll explore the potential and the challenges that this fascinating nation faces. Before we move further into analyzing if India is still a third world country, let me try to explain what the term third world actually means and how relevant it is today. The term third world arose during the Cold War, and it was used to define countries that remain non-aligned with either NATO or the Warsaw Pact. The United States, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Western European nations, and their allies represented the First World, while the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, and their allies represented the Second World. This terminology provided a way of broadly categorizing the nations of the earth into three groups based on political divisions. French demographer, anthropologist, and historian Alfred Sauvy, in an article published in a French magazine in 1952, coined the term Third World, referring to countries that were playing a small role in international trade and business. Because many Third World countries were economically poor and non-industrialized, it became a stereotype to refer to developing countries as third world countries. The third world was normally seen to include many countries with colonial pasts in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. It was also sometimes synonymous with countries in the non-aligned movement. By the end of the 1960s, the idea of the term came to represent countries that were considered underdeveloped by the West, based on a variety of characteristics. These were low economic development, low life expectancy, high rates of poverty and disease. These countries became the targets for aid and support from governments, NGOs, and individuals from wealthier nations. Thus, foreign aid was needed to help kickstart industrialization and economic growth in these countries. Since the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, the use of the term Third World has significantly decreased. It is being replaced with terms such as developing countries, least developed countries, or the Global South. There is no all-agreed definition of a developing country. More than a strict definition, a developing country differs from a developed one in categorization used by international institutions. Agencies such as the United Nations, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, or the World Economic Forum use their indicators to club developed and developing countries. The World Bank currently categorizes India as a lower middle income economy, a term meant for countries with a gross national income per capita of between $1,086 and $4,255. High-income countries like the US have a per capita income of $13,205 or more. A developed country is typically characterized by a relatively high level of economic growth, a general standard of living, and higher per capita income, as well as performing well on the Human Development Index, which includes education, literacy, and health. A significant measure to gauge the nature of a country's economy is the per capita income. Countries with a higher gross domestic product per capita showcase traits of a developed nation. As per World Bank data, India's GDP per capita stood at $2,277 in 2021. In comparison, that of developed countries like China, USA, and UK stand at much higher numbers, with that of the US being at the highest at $69,287. Though countries like the US already see India as a future challenger to China's influence in Asia and beyond, India, along with many other developing economies, continues to be known for widespread poverty, poor literacy rates, and its skewed gender ratio. India also has increasing issues of corruption, an out-of-date caste framework, child malnutrition, high levels of air pollution, and gender and income inequality. These factors affect the quality of life of its citizens and the ranking of the country on most international human development indices. Let us look at a few of these issues in detail. India faces the issues of deep-rooted inequality, which has worsened over the last few decades, making room for inclusive growth smaller. On one side, there are high-flying tech-savvy people driving flashy vehicles in and out of posh hotels and clubs. On the other hand, there are people who are languishing in poverty and struggling to survive. The income disparity is caused by the country's poorly structured agricultural sectors and rural safety net programs. Among some Indian communities, women are often treated very poorly. Stories of crimes against women in India hit the headlines on a very frequent basis. Even today, there is a clear preference for a male child in Indian society. The country also has one of the lowest rates of participation of working-age females in the workforce. Again, like many other third world countries, India has high levels of corruption. This issue has had a severe negative impact on the nation's growth, and former and current governments have not been successful in getting a permanent solution. A substantial portion of the population pays bribes or uses contacts to receive services offered by public offices. Corruption is primarily caused by excessive regulations, complex tax and licensing frameworks, and many government departments with hazy bureaucracy and unrestricted powers. India is also home to the largest number of illiterate people in the world, with over 25% of the population still uneducated. Over the past 5 years or so, studies by established organizations have shown that a large number of Indian graduates are unemployable. As per one report, this was applicable to nearly 80% of graduating engineers. Reforms in the education process are now being implemented to steer it away from rote learning, but this is still a work in progress. With the new education policy aiming to achieve 100% literacy in the next decade, the country still has a long way to go before the population becomes truly literate. Unemployment is one of the major challenges that India faces in its quest for economic growth and development. Unemployment means that the available human resources are not fully utilized, resulting in a loss of output and income. According to the CEIC data, India's unemployment rate was 7.11% in 2020, the highest in the last 3 decades. The COVID-19 pandemic had a severe impact on the Indian economy, causing a contraction of 7.3% in the year 2020. The lockdown measures imposed to contain the virus disrupted various sectors, especially the informal and unorganized ones, which employ about 90% of India's workforce. Millions of workers lost their jobs or faced reduced incomes, especially in the urban areas. The high unemployment rate has a negative effect on India's growth potential, as it reduces the aggregate demand, consumption, investment, and savings in the economy. It also lowers the tax revenues and increases the fiscal deficit for the government, limiting its ability to spend on public goods and services. Moreover, unemployment erodes the skills and productivity of the workers, making them less employable in the future. To overcome the unemployment problem and boost its growth rates, India needs to implement effective policies that can create more and better jobs for its large and young population. Some of the possible measures include improving the quality and access to education and skill development programs, especially for women and rural youth, to enhance their employability and entrepreneurship opportunities. Investing in infrastructure, innovation, and digitalization to increase the productivity and competitiveness of various sectors, especially manufacturing and services. Simplifying the labor laws and regulations to reduce the costs and barriers for hiring and firing workers, and to encourage formalization and social security for the informal workers. promoting inclusive and sustainable development by addressing the issues of poverty, inequality, social exclusion, environmental degradation, and climate change. Despite all the issues just mentioned, India is still one of the fastest growing economies in the world, with a nominal GDP of $3.75 trillion in 2023. It has grown at an average annual rate of 7.2% since 1991, when it embarked on a series of economic reforms. India's growth has been driven by the expansion of the service sector, which accounts for more than half of its GDP and employs over a third of its workforce. India is poised to surpass Japan and become the third largest economy in the world by 2030, with a GDP of $7.3 trillion. India's demographic profile, with a large and young population, is a source of economic growth and social change if India invests in education, healthcare, skill development, and job creation for its youth. India is also undergoing a digital transformation that is expected to accelerate the growth of e-commerce, changing the retail consumer market landscape over the next decade. India's digital transactions are 4 times that of the US, UK, France, and Germany. Per capita internet data usage in India is also more than the total data consumption of the US and China. India's progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a set of 17 global goals for ending poverty, protecting the planet, and ensuring peace and prosperity by 2030, is mixed. India performed well on goals such as affordable and clean energy, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and climate action. However, it lagged behind on goals such as zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, and gender equality. As we come to the end of this video, it is important to mention that despite all the issues that continue to plague it, India's economic growth in the last couple of years and its undeniable potential cannot be ignored. It is all set to assume the position of the world's third largest economy in just 7 years from now. So it is obvious that it can no longer be referred to as a third world country without one realizing that it doesn't quite fit in with the other countries on that list. The term developing country is a far more accurate representation of the trajectory that India is following at the moment, and we're proud to be a part of this journey that our country is on. Thank you for staying with us and watching this video. If you like this content, we request you to click like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with family and friends. This will help us in consistently bringing more such detailed videos to you. Once again, thank you for your time.